In this video, I'm going to discuss best practices for noise reduction in an Adobe workflow. And in the first case, I'll take a look at some images shot with a Nikon D70 about 15 years ago. And you'll notice when you open them in Lightroom that the sharpening value is set to 40. And this is a default that actually makes your images a little noisier. So you want to always zero out sharpening before you do anything else. And preferably create a preset. So I'm going to copy that sharpening value to all the rest of the images in the batch and paste that setting to the rest in the batch. In the develop module in Lightroom, I'm now going to run denoise on all those neutralized images, and this will take a while. I've sped it up a bit. Value of 50 is okay, and I'll batch process all the images. So you'll get a duplicate set with the name enhanced appended to the file name. You could actually delete the originals if you like, and I'm going to export TIFF 16-bit for PT GUI. And it's this set that you want to stitch. So just drag them onto PT GUI and go for a stitch. This actually worked out pretty well for some 15-year-old images. And we'll create the panorama and take a look in the PT GUI viewer. And this is pretty good. I think I should probably do a little more sharpening on the originals. You don't want to sharpen the finished panorama. I'd go back and restitch. Also, I'd want to pick up some of the flare in the trees. And 15 years ago, I wasn't very good at hiding my shadow. So to recap, for DSLR mirrorless panoramas, reduce sharpening to 0 on all your raw images and use a preset in Lightroom for this. You'll then run denoise on all the raw files. Do your editing and retouching before stitching as much as possible. Export TIFF or JPEG for your stitcher, and try to resist noise reduction, sharpening, chromatic aberration on finished panoramas. Okay, and next up we'll take a look at noise reduction for the Ricoh Theta Z1. This would also apply to the Insta360 RS1 cameras that have Bayer sensors. So again, we'll zero out the sharpening. So we have a neutral file. Then we'll run denoise. Double checking noise reduction for color, that should be about 25. And then we'll denoise. About 50% is good. And I'm going to follow up now with some sharpening and masking. Masking constrains the sharpening to hard edges, and just a little bit of luminance noise reduction. Now we'll stitch in the Ricoh Theta Stitcher. We'll go for JPEG, sRGB, and take a look at the final result. So the stitch looks pretty good. I'm going to edit in FSP Viewer, and I've added FSP Viewer as an editor in Lightroom. So if we zoom in, it looks pretty noise-free. And this is about the best you can get from a Ricoh Theta Z1. So to recap, for cameras like the Theta Z1 or the Insta360 RS1, which have Bayer sensors, You want to reduce sharpening to 0 on your raw images and use a Lightroom preset to make things easier for you. You run AI denoise, do most of your editing and retouching before stitching, run your stitch, and try to avoid CA noise reduction and sharpening on final images. I'll talk more about this at the end. Next, we'll take a look at a procedure for noise reduction for non-Bayer sensor cameras like the X, the new QCam, and most of the Insta360 cameras with the exception of the RS1. So again, you want to reduce sharpening to 0. You do not want to run denoise. It will not work on non-Bayer sensors like the X. But what you want to do is you want to edit in Photoshop. I'm using beta. You could use 2025 or some previous release. And I'm going to use the neural filter JPEG artifacts on the current layer and let that run. And I'll save the image and pop back to Lightroom for some additional editing. The colors at 0, I'm not seeing any noise issues, but perhaps a little bit of color noise reduction, about 6 or so. And then I'll add a little bit of sharpening, 20, 30, 40 with a bit of masking. You just don't want to see halos appearing on the image or any artifacts. You don't need much, if any, luminance noise reduction. And we'll stitch in the Ricoh Theta Stitcher to JPEG sRGB. And the stitch is looking pretty good. And we'll take a look at the final result. We'll zoom in and follow up by viewing in the FSP viewer so we can see it in 360. And that's a fairly good, successful image for a 360 virtual tour. So if you edit carefully, Ricoh Theta X images can give you a very good result. So to recap, for non-Bayer sensor cameras like the Theta X, the new QCam 3, and many of the Insta360 one-shot cameras, reduce your sharpening to 0. Use a preset if necessary in Lightroom. Edit in Photoshop and apply JPEG artifacts neural filter. Adjust sharpening and masking to taste. Stitch. And avoid noise reduction, CA sharpening, and retouching near the edges. And some notes on editing finished panoramas. Avoid chromatic aberration on a finished panorama. It's a radial adjustment meant for conventional lenses, not stitched panoramas. Avoid sharpening and noise reduction. They can cause whirlpool artifacts at nadir and zenith. And avoid heavy edits in Lightroom and Photoshop. You can actually break it, even though Lightroom and Photoshop are seam aware. And finally, avoid painting or local adjustments at the seam on the sides or the top and the bottom. Thanks for watching. My name is Clay Moorhead, 360 Niagara.